Today's daf we're going to be learning is Kiddushin Daf Nun Daled. This is the daf for Hoshana Rabbah. Today's daf is sponsored by Gita Neufeld in loving memory of her mother-in-law, Idol Bat Natan Basara, Alice Neufeld. Ma led by example with her yekish, scrupulous observance of mitzvot, her appreciation of beauty in all its manifestations, and her prioritization of learning and academic achievement. She never made me feel like I was her daughter-in-law. I was her daughter. We had the zchut to have her live with us at the end of her long life, and the impact of that time continues to resound within us and our children and grandchildren. Yehi Zechra Baruch. We're going to get started with a quick review of yesterday, what we saw at the previous daf. We saw this machloket, both about maaser sheni, which we'll come back to later, and hekdesh. If somebody betroths a woman with hekdesh money, which she's not allowed to use to betroth a woman, is she betrothed or not? So Rabbi Meir had said, and right now we're focusing exclusively on Rabbi Meir, that b'mezid kiddush, if he did it intentionally, it's actually kiddushin, because when you misuse consecrated property intentionally, you basically turn it into chulin. You basically say, I want this to be not sacred, and therefore it's not sacred, and therefore she's betrothed. But if you do it b'shogeg, Rabbi Meir says, and this is what we're going to struggle to really understand, Rabbi Meir says, b'shogeg kiddush, b'shogeg lo kiddush. She is not betrothed if you did it accidentally. What we saw on Daf Nun Gimel is that Rabbi Yochanan explains this is because neither one, or maybe only one of them, anyway, that's all machlokah we got into yesterday. The main point is it's what we call a mekach ta'ut. They didn't want this to happen. Nobody would have wanted to use a sanctified money to betroth a woman, and therefore it's what we call a mekach ta'ut. It's a mistake, in which case nothing ever happened. And that's what they end up asking on yesterday's daf. Do you really mean to say that if somebody spends money, sanctified money, on something, that money, is this what Rabbi Meir is saying? That money is actually never, it doesn't, what normally happens in meila is I misuse consecrated property and it turns to chulin. But it sounds like what Rabbi Yochanan is explaining here is that according to Rabbi Meir, this money doesn't become unsanctified. This because nothing really ever happened here. Okay, the money was never given. The mekach was a mistake. It was as if no money transferred because nothing actually happened. Okay, that's what we explained yesterday. Okay, ma'ot ma'oshi yitzu l'chulin. That was the question asked Rav Chisda, and he says, right, if isha en mekadeshet, the ma'ot he'ach yitzu l'chulin. It must be they did it become chulin. Otherwise, Rabbi Meir would have allowed this. Okay, again, this is very different than the way we understand meila, because we end up, and we'll see later from our sugya, we end up understanding meila according to Rabbi Yehuda, who doesn't agree with this, because meila in general is bishkaga. That's clear from the Torah, and therefore, even if it was accidental, it should work. Okay, it should turn to non-sacred. Okay, but it's clear that, which is why Rabbi Yehuda says, if it's bishkaga, then it actually turns into unsanctified money, which means that she actually is betrothed. But we're trying to understand Rabbi Meir. So we're now going to have a second understanding of Rabbi Meir, because it sounds really crazy that Rabbi Meir would say, if the Torah talks about shkaga, what is shkaga if not this? So, right, this is shkaga. You use money by accident, thinking you went to the store, bought something with sanctified money, or you betrothed a woman with sanctified money, thinking it wasn't sanctified. That's classic meila. So how could you say it didn't turn to chulin? Now, again, the logic until now in Rabbi Yochanan is because nothing really happened. Meila would be if I actually ate something, okay? And we'll get back to this later. And it's no longer here, and then I could say, well, that's meila. But if nothing ever happened and the sale reverts back, I keep my money, you keep your item, nothing ever happened, or he's not betrothed to her, then how could you say, right? That's the understanding. Rabbi Meir says that actually the money stays sanctified. But Amar Rav says, this is preposterous. And he basically starts off at the top of our daf and says, Chazarnu al kol hatzidim shel Rabbi Meir. I've looked all over everything Rabbi Meir said. I've tried all the possibilities. This distinction that if he does it on purpose, it'll turn into chulin. But if he does it b'mezid, it won't turn into chulin. That doesn't make any sense. And really what he's focusing on is b'shogeg, of course it's mitchalel, because that's korban meila is on shkaga. So what if it was eaten? So what if it wasn't eaten? If the money's still there, if the money reverts back, but that's what meila is. It's misuse of consecrated property. And obviously then, once you misuse it, you consider it chulin, even though it wasn't intentional, because again, meila in general isn't intentional. Meila, according to the Torah, is when you do it accidentally. So that's just the way it works with meila. So it can't possibly be that's what Rabbi Meir said. So now we're stuck, because if Rabbi Meir really thinks it turns to chulin, then why does he think that you can't betroth a woman with this? In order to explain that, Rab has to say the Mishnah isn't a very unique case. Mishnatenu biktonet kihuna shelo balu. Our Mishnah is talking about bigdei kihuna, the Kohen's clothing that are not worn out, that are in good, pristine shape, that are still being used, that means. Because what's different about these? Well, specifically these, there's no law of meila. Okay, there's meila. Well, there is laws of meila, sort of, but we'll see. A very interesting line, which appears a few times in the Gemara. The Torah was not given to angels. What does that have to do with anything? Well, we're human beings. That means that when we are kohanim working in the temple and we wear special kahuna clothes for the avodah, now what happens? We finish our avodah. Can we go poof, snap of a finger, and I don't benefit from those clothes anymore, and my new clothes are on my regular clothes? No, it takes a minute, however long it does, for me to go change those clothes. Can't happen in an instant. I'm not an angel. I can't do magic. So what happens? Well, the regular Kohen clothing is actually given for people to benefit from in some sort of way, which is the Kohen can get to a changing room, change his clothes, and enjoy benefit from the clothing. It's covering his body that whole time. He's getting benefit from them in that small amount of time. This is because the Torah wasn't given to angels. We don't have a way to do it otherwise. So because of that, what do we end up saying? We end up saying that our Mishnah, okay, now you have to make a jump. Since these clothes had some way that one could benefit from them, and therefore there's no loss of meila, or at least, right, in other words, now we have to make that turnover. It's not that there's no loss of meila, but if somebody accidentally used those clothes to betroth a woman, since and it was just by accident, and it's b'mezid, okay, well, he intentionally turned them into something chol, something not sacred. But if it happened by accident, since we have this area where there is those quick moments after the Kohen finishes working that one can benefit, likewise here we're going to say theoretically one can benefit, meaning we won't obligate you in meila. If we don't obligate you in meila, then there's no chilul. It never becomes unsacred. If it never becomes unsacred, you can't betroth the woman. That's what Rabbi Meir says. It's a little bit complicated. I want to focus for one quick minute because I can't avoid doing this. It's so interesting. This concept of we are not like angels. Now, normally it's understood to mean, right, we wish we could be like angels, but we can't, right? And that's just the way it is. But Professor Christina Hayes, who is a professor that analyzes a lot of Talmudic sugyot, an excellent Talmudic professor of Talmud, she has an excellent shiur you can find online about this line, Lo nitna Torah l'malachei hasharev. And she basically flips it on its head and said, this is actually an ideal. We aspire to say that we are not like angels. And that she quotes this, she has a line that says, don't let perfect be the enemy of the good. If we strive for perfection, we won't actually be able to do mitzvot. Right? If you couldn't, and if you had to be like an angel, then you wouldn't be able to use these clothes at all. And then the Kohen would never be able to have clothes that he could wear for his work and then not benefit from them. Because we're humans and we have no choice but to sometimes benefit from something that maybe we're not supposed to, because there's no other way to do it. It would prevent us from being able to keep the Torah. And that's something unique and something that we aspire to as humans, that we are humans. And that allows us to keep mitzvot in a better way. And she quotes it using the times, you can see where this appears in the Gemara, this phrase. From there, she creates her theory. Anyway, that's an aside. Now we're going to get back to our topic. So we now explained, according to Rav, that this is a unique situation. Okay, just in this, but normally, shogeg, meila, it's not because of a mekach ta'ut. It's not because there was a mistake here and no one ever would have really wanted this to happen. No, meila kicks in, the sacred item becomes whole, and actually you can betroth her with it. Only if, right, like if it was sacred ma'ot, money, it was sanctified, it would work, okay, to betroth a woman. So now we're going to bring a few sources to try to raise contradiction against Rav. 3 sources that we're going to have answers to all of them. Tashma, maybe more convincing or less convincing, but we will have answers. Kotznot kuna shebalu. If you have clothing of a Kohen that already is worn out. Mo'alim b'hem, there's laws of meila divrei Rabbi Meir. So Rabbi Meir says there is meila by clothing of a Kohen that's worn out, and we assume if the worn out clothing is sanctified to the extent that there's meila, then obviously the non-worn out clothing would be all the more so sanctified, and there would be a law of meila, and that goes against what we said here. My lava filu lo balu, right? So it sounds like it's saying if they were worn away, and all the more so if they weren't worn away, because you would think those have higher level of sanctity to them. But the Gemara says, no. Lo, balu dafka. No. It's specifically when they're worn out, then you no longer have this ability to use them in any way, to benefit from them. And then it would actually go back to having meila. These don't have meila because they can be used. Those are the better ones, can be used, and therefore there is no meila. The ones that are worn out, there is a law of meila. Tashma, second source. Mo'alim b'chadatim ve'em mo'alim ba'atikim. Now we're talking about coins in the temple. Everyone would bring the machatzira shekel to the temple, the half shekel. That money would go into a box, 3 boxes, and then they would, 3 times a year, they would take money out and buy sacrifices with it. Now, whatever money was left was called shayarei alishka. They were called the old ones. If we didn't need all that money for the sacrifices, for buying the animals, then they were called, that was the extra leftover. That's called the atikim, the old ones. Or if I forgot to bring one year, then I bring the next year, but my last year's doesn't go into the main thing. It goes into what's called the shayarei alishka, the extras. So now there's a law of meila for the new shekels that are going to be used to buy the sacrifices, but there isn't a law of meila for the old ones. I have divrei Rabbi Yehuda, but it's in parentheses here, so that means we really shouldn't use it. Most of the people think that shouldn't be here, so let's just say this is Tanakama. Now Rabbi Meir, this is where it's going to be important to us because it's going to contradict what the way Rav understands Rabbi Meir. Mo'alim af ba'atikim, even old shekels, there's a law of meila by them. Shaya Rabbi Meir omer mo'alim b'shayarei halishka. Because Rabbi Meir was known to say there is meila by the shayarei halishka, and the old coins go to the shayarei halishka. That's the extra money. We're going to see in a minute what this has to do with. Well, amai, and that's what do we do with the shayarei halishka? Amai, nema ho'il v'nitnu lehenot lefi shelo nitna Torah l'malachei hasharet. Okay, well, wait a minute. Wasn't the shayarei halishka given to people that they could benefit from it because the Torah wasn't given to angels? The same claim. Now, why? Daha chomat ha'ir u'migdaloteha. We should have learned this in the beginning. But the walls of the city and its towers, city of Jerusalem, mishayarei halishka atu. Let's start from the end now. The walls of the city and the towers were built from this shayarei halishka. Now, if you walk by a building and the building is blocking the sun, you have no choice but to benefit from it. You're not an angel that could somehow doesn't need shade at all. You need shade. You're going to benefit from that wall. Okay, wall. Maybe you'll lean against it at some point. That was given to people to benefit from the walls. So they're not like sanctified items that there's no benefit, right? That people don't benefit. There is. You might say the walls of Jerusalem are sanctified, but there is room for people to use them. Now, Rabbi Meir says, because there's room for people to use them, there's no law of meila. That doesn't fit here. He says there is a law of meila by the walls, right? By the money, which is used to buy the walls, and people benefit from the walls, just like the Kohanim benefit from their clothing. So, how do we explain this? Very simply, lo tema Rabbi Meir, ela ema Rabbi Yehuda. It's a mistake, and it should say Rabbi Yehuda and not Rabbi Meir, and that's how we resolve it. We're going to try to do the same thing with the next source, but we're going to have a little more trouble with that, but we will figure it out in the end and attribute it to Rabbi Yehuda. Tashma de Tanya, so let's look at here. It says in a Braita, Amar Rabbi Yishmael bar Rabbi Yitzchak, Avnei Yerushalayim shenashru mo'alim bahem, divrei Rabbi Meir. The stones of Jerusalem that fall off the wall, there's a law of meila. That's what Rabbi Meir says. So same issue. What do you mean? The walls, right? How could there be meila? Don't people benefit from the stones in the wall? Lo tema Rabbi Meir, ela ema Rabbi Yehuda. Why don't we say Rabbi Yehuda and then that resolves it? Now, so now we have that Rabbi Yehuda thinks that the walls of Jerusalem have sanctity to them, okay? And there's laws of meila apply to them. Well, Rabbi Yehuda Yerushalayim mi mekadsha, but wait, that doesn't fit with something Rabbi Yehuda says somewhere else because Jerusalem is not sanctified and the walls of Jerusalem are not sanctified. How do we know this? V'hatnan. This is a Mishnah we learned in Nidarim. It says in the Mishnah something called hatpasa, which is if I'm going to forbid something as a vow, I have to connect it. This food to me will be like something that's forbidden. So ki'imra, like the animals that get sacrificed on the altar, kidirim, ki'etzim, ki'ishim, ki'echal, ki'mizbeach, ki'Yerushalayim. Okay, these are all things that go on the temple, the trees, the fire, right? The wood, the fire. Okay, then we get to the altar, and like Jerusalem, okay, because Jerusalem is sanctified, right? Meaning like the walls of Jerusalem. So Rabbi Yehuda Omer, but Rabbi Yehuda disagrees and says, Kol Omer Yerushalayim lo amar klum. If you say Jerusalem, doesn't mean anything. Now notice there's a small difference. The first opinion is a Ke Yerushalayim, like Jerusalem, and Rabbi Yehuda says anyone who says Jerusalem, like this bread, Jerusalem. Well, if you want to say that maybe Rabbi Yehuda's opinion is, well, if you say Jerusalem, it doesn't mean anything. You have to say like Jerusalem, because that's the whole concept of hatpasa, to say this is like this. Well, if you say that, then we have no problem. He does think Jerusalem is sanctified. He just thinks you didn't use the kaf there, the like, which means that's why it's not going to be forbidden. But you can't say that because Hatanya, it says in a different braita, Rabbi Yehuda Omer Kol Omer Ki Yerushalayim Lo Amar Klum Ad Shidur B'Davar HaKarev B'Yerushalayim. Just saying like Jerusalem, or saying the whole phrase like Jerusalem, won't work either according to Rabbi Yehuda, according to this braita, because you have to say it's forbidden like something that is sacrificed in Jerusalem. Just saying Jerusalem doesn't work. Just saying like Jerusalem doesn't work. So how are we going to now say that this source is Rabbi Yehuda, when if we want to say that Rabbi Yehuda says the stones that fall out of the wall of Jerusalem are, there's a law of meila, meaning they're sanctified, then that doesn't fit with Rabbi Yehuda, who thinks that Jerusalem isn't sanctified at all. To which they answer, Trey Tanai, Minhu Pali with Rabbi Yehuda. There's two ways to understand Rabbi Yehuda. That braita, we brought two sources. One said, Rabbi Yehuda says Yerushalayim, doesn't mean anything. One said Ki Yerushalayim. If you hold like Ki Yerushalayim, then you can't reread the source according to Rabbi Yehuda. But if you say Yerushalayim, that's what he said, and Ki Yerushalayim would actually work, that's because he does think it's sanctified, and that fits in together with the stones. So we end up saying there is a way at least to understand this so it doesn't contradict Rabbi Meir. So we brought three sources against Rav's interpretation of Rabbi Meir, that anything that is sanctified but has room where someone can benefit, like the walls of Jerusalem, like the clothing of the Kohen Gadol, that's what our mission is referring to, specifically those unique cases where once something can be partially used, if you accidentally use it and try to betroth the woman with it, it won't work. But if it's not that, and it's just regular meila, like any money, let's say, that's sanctified, and you betroth the woman with it, he doesn't agree with Rabbi Yochanan that it's all a mekach ta'ut, and it was all a mistake, and really nothing changes here. Nothing becomes chulin. That's why you can't use it. No. Comes Rav and says, no. Actually, that would become chulin, and you could betroth the woman, even according to Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir was talking about this unique case. Now we're going to go back to that first opinion of Rabbi Yochanan and have someone else is going to explain it in the same way as he does, and we're going to get a little more in depth about it. Amar Ula Mishmei de Bar Pada. So Ula says in the name of Bar Pada, Omer Haya Rabbi Meir, hekdesh b'mezin mitchalel, b'shogeg ein mitchalel. So he says, like Rabbi Yochanan, it said that according to Rabbi Meir, hekdesh on purpose will turn to chulin, and that's why you can betroth the woman with it. But b'shogeg, if you do it accidentally, it doesn't become a chulin. Again, this goes completely against Rav, but like Rabbi Yochanan's understanding. Now we have to understand, well, the Torah did seem to indicate that laws of meila apply in a shkaga case, and therefore you would think it turns to chulin, because if it doesn't turn to chulin, then you haven't desacralized, you haven't made it unsanctified. So what he says is, well, when we say b'shogeg mitchalel, ela linyan korban bilvad, he says this strange thing, which in a minute the Gemara is going to totally reject, but he says that when we say that it's mitchalel and that there's meila and shkaga, what it means is if you accidentally misused consecrated property, used it for something else, you have to bring a sacrifice, but it remains in its sanctified state. To which the Gemara says that's absurd. Your whole reason why you're chayav shvuat meila is because you took something sacred and you used it for a non-sacred purpose. Now, if you didn't turn it into something sacred, non-sacred, then you haven't done anything wrong. The problem is that you're ruining the sanctity of this item, and you're taking it and changing its status. And that's why you're obligated to sacrifice. So you can't possibly say that there's such a thing, that it isn't, there's no chilul, it doesn't become chol, not sacred, and yet you're obligated to korban, no way, no how. So they fix what Bar Pada must have said, because this was passed down from Ula in the name of Bar Pada comes Elakiata Rabin. These are both Amoraim from Eretz Israel who are coming to give over the Torah of Barpada, who was from Israel, who was earlier. Elakiata Rabin. So when Rabin came to Bavel, he explained to us, Palish Mishmei de Barpada. He explained the following in the name of Barpada. Omer Haya Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir was known to say, hekdesh bebezid mitchalel, b'shogeg ein mitchalel, the same thing. Hekdesh, intentionally it will become chulin. Unintentionally, it won't become chulin. Unless what? Lo amru b'shogeg mitchalel. Now, according to this, Rabbi Meir's understanding of meila and shgaga in the Torah and the whole thing that meila is only in accidental cases is very limited. The only time you're going to give a korban meila is what? Lo amru b'shogeg mitchalel, it will become chulin, and then you'll be obligated your korban, which we just learned has to go hand in hand. Ela le'inyan achila bilfat. The whole issue by us, and this really explains it even better, with the Kiddushin, was that you were giving her money. She was supposed to be betrothed by that money. When you find out that the whole thing was chulin, you both, hekdesh, you both say, I never would have wanted that. I want the money to go back. And in the end, you can do that. The money can go back, and it was as if nothing transpired. And that's what Rabbi Meir thinks in that case. The money actually doesn't become chulin because we go by what we talked about before. Mekach ta'ud, it's just a mistake. It was a mistaken sale or a mistaken betrothal, right? We said it applies to sale, betrothal, just the same. However, if I took, let's say, sacrificial meat and I ate it, okay, I gave it to my dog, let's say, and my dog ate it, okay? That was not treating it in a sanctified manner. If my dog ate that sacrificial meat, that would be meila by accident. Why? If I did it accidentally, why? Then I'd be chayav the korban. Because it's consumed. Once something is consumed, you can't say, oh, mekach ta'ud, it all goes back. There's nothing to go back. So then I'm obligated meila. Because what I did was, I had that become consumed, which turned it into chulin, which basically means that now I'm obligated because I treated it as chulin and it got consumed. So if something gets consumed, then I will be obligated meila. If it's still there and we can just reverse it and say, erase or delete, let's say, right? This never happened because that's not what I would have wanted. Had you told me I never would have wanted this, then it actually goes back to its original state of being hekdesh. And that's a very interesting distinction that he's making, which helps us understand Rabbi Meir a little bit better, which is how does he understand meila according to Torah law? It's only in items that are consumed. Okay, I drank something, right? Yein nesach, wine that was not yein nesach of Gentiles, but wine that they used for libations in the temple. And I drank it, right? So I'm liable for meila because I took it and I treated it like chol and I turned it into chol by drinking it. In my mouth, it became chol. Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rav Ad bar Ava. Now we have to go back to the Mishnah. We had these two. We had three machlokot. We're talking about the last two. Halakha between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda about maaser. Is maaser mamon gavoa or mamon hedyot? Is it money that belongs to God, like hekdesh, or is it money that belongs to people? And then we had a machloket. If it's your own money, it's just you have to bring it to the temple and eat it there, then you can betroth the woman with it. If it's not your money, but it belongs to God, then you can't betroth the woman. So Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rav Ad bar Ava, halakha ke Rabbi Meir b'maaser. Okay, the halakha is like Rabbi Meir. You remember what Rabbi Meir said by maaser, right? He said the opposite of what he said by hekdesh. He said, maaser sheni, bein b'shogeg, bein b'mezid, lo kiddush. Okay, she's not betrothed at all with maaser sheni money because maaser sheni money is mamon gavoa, belongs to God. And Rabbi Yehuda said that b'shogeg lo kiddush, but b'mezid kiddush, b'mezid it works because it's his own money. Okay, if it was b'shogeg, then it's a different story. But b'mezid, it's his own money, so he can. So now he says the following: the halakha is like Rabbi Meir. B'maaser, maaser is considered mamon gavoa, like God. Ho'il v'stam lantana kavate, because we have a stam mishnah that holds that way. There's generally a rule if there's a mishnah with an unattributed name and no machloket, we assume that's the halakha. Halakha ke Rabbi Yehuda b'hekdesh, and when it comes to laws of hekdesh and meila, like we discussed, and betrothing a woman with hekdesh, ho'il v'stam, the halakha is like Rabbi Yehuda. Okay, which is why our whole understanding of meila really goes according to Rabbi Yehuda and not these weird understandings of, we don't even understand how to understand Rabbi Meir, but who has a very limited understanding of meila, possibly. Again, according to Rav, it's not so limited. It's just this case was unique. But according to Rabbi Yochanan and Barpada, it's actually pretty standard. This was, he thought in general, and then you'd have to say, kind of like Barpada, that meila only applies if it's consumed, but not if it's not consumed. Otherwise, it's a mekach ta'ut, but we don't hold that way. We hold like Rabbi Yehuda hekdesh, the b'shogeg, it becomes chulin. And therefore, you can actually betroth a woman with hekdesh money. Ho'il, and what's the reason why we hold like Rabbi Yehuda here? Ho'il b'stam lantana kavate, because this is stam mishnah like this. So now we have to find out, number one, where is the stam lan mishnah that holds like Rabbi Meir by maaser, and where's the stam mishnah that holds like Rabbi Yehuda by hekdesh? And then after that, we're going to have several questions. Oh, what about this mishnah? What about that mishnah? That seems to go against what we said. So, ki Rabbi Meir b'maaser mahi. What's the mishnah by Rabbi Meir in maaser? Ditna. Okay, the mishnah says, we're in a mishnah in maaser sheni. Kerem revai. Kerem revai is your kerem, or some people say it's even neta revai, whether it's your trees or your vines, your grapes that grow for the first 3 years. It's orla. We can't eat them at all. The 4th year, you have to bring it to the temple, very much like maaser sheni. You could redeem it on a coin and bring the money to Jerusalem and eat it there. Kerem revai. Beit Shammai omrim ein lo chomesh ve'ein lo bil. It's not completely like maaser sheni, because you don't have to add the chomesh, you don't have to add the extra 5th when you redeem it, because Torah only says the 5th by maaser, and there's no law of bi'or masrot. Bi'or masrot is at the end of the 4th and the 7th year. You have to say bi'arti hakodesh min habayit, so I got rid of all my maaser, you have to get rid of them all, etc. Beit Hillel omrim yesh lo. Beit Hillel says it has all the same rules as maaser sheni. Another machloka between them. Beit Shammai omrim about kerem revai yesh lo peret veyesh lo olalot. If you drop some of them, okay, that's like leket by food, so by fruits and vegetables. When it comes to, or by fruits, when it comes to peret, the grapes, it's leaving over, dropping a few of the grapes. It's called peret. Or olalot is if there's clusters where you have a cluster of grapes that's missing a whole huge chunk in the middle of it or something like that, you have to leave that for the poor also, like a messed up bunch of grapes. Ubeit Hillel omrim kulo lagat. No, you can take all of this and take it to the God. Okay, there's no issue here of peret olalot. Okay, you can take it and make wine out of it. So now we want to understand. My time of debate Hillel, the first machlok. Gamre kodesh kodesh mi maaser. Says this Gzera Shava. It says kodesh by maaser. It says kodesh by kerem revai. Ma maaser yesh lo chomesh veyesh lo biur. Av kerem revai yesh lo chomesh veyesh lo biur. Therefore, even though the halachot of biur and the 5th only come up in maaser sheni, whatever's true for that is going to be true for kerem revai. Ubeit Shammai lo gamre kodesh kodesh mi maaser. And Beit Shammai says we don't make that Gzera Shava at all, and therefore not. Ubeit Hillel omrim ki maaser. When Beit Hillel says it's like maaser keman sfira lehu, who could he be holding like? Iki Rabbi Yehuda. Now, if he holds it's like maaser, well, what did we say about maaser? According to Rabbi Yehuda, it's mamon hediot. According to Rabbi Meir, it's mamon gavoah. It belongs to God. So now, if he says kerem revai is like maaser, that would mean let's say it's Rabbi Yehuda. It belongs to that. It's owned by that person, right? Keman sfira lehu. Iki Rabbi Yehuda. If he holds like Rabbi Yehuda that it's mamon hediot, amai kulo lagat. Ha'amar maaser mamon hediotu. Elalav ki Rabbi Meir. How could you say that it all goes? Now, what does it mean kulo lagat? You don't have a law of peret and you don't have a law of olalot. Why not? Anything that belongs to me, I have to give part of it to the poor. That's why Beit Shammai says, yesh lo peret, yesh lo olalot, it belongs to me. But Rabbi Yehuda says you can use it all for the gat. Why? Because, well, right, you'd have to say you can use it. It's still got sanctity to it. It's still got the status of kerem revai, but we view it as belonging to God. Once something belongs to God, there's no laws of peret and olalut. It doesn't apply. It only applies between humans, one person to another. It doesn't apply between God. So anything, for example, if it's owned by the temple, there's no law of peret and olalut. So Rabbi Yehuda, who says kulo lagat, basically is saying that, I'm sorry, Beit Hillel, my mistake. Beit Hillel says kulo lagat must be holding like Rabbi Meir, who says that it's mamon gavoah, it belongs to God, and that's why there isn't any. So here you see, now it's not actually a stam mishnah, it's a little bit tricky. It's Beit Hillel, though. We all know we hold like Beit Hillel. So the Beit Hillel is the main opinion here, and therefore you see it follows the opinion of Rabbi Meir and not the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda there. So now we move to the second. Rabbi Yehuda behekdesh mai. How do we know we hold like Rabbi Yehuda when it comes to hekdesh? That again, b'shgaga, it's mitchalel, right? And we'll see. Okay. And therefore, if you want to do Kiddushin with money that was used for, in the wrong way, you can actually be betrothed. Okay. So let's see what it says here. Titna. And then that basically means, and the other thing that's very important is, he says if it was mazid though, right? What does he say b'mazid? B'mazid lo kiddush. If you do meila intentionally, we weren't focusing on this at all for now, but now we're going to go back to this. If you do it intentionally, then that's not meila at all. And that seems to be from the simple reading of the Torah. It's all bishgaga. Okay, if you do meila bishgaga, it says there in the pasuk, by accident. So if you do it b'mazid, it's not mitchalel, which means, right, it doesn't become chulim, which means there's no meila yet, which means that you can't betroth a woman with it. So let's see what we have, Mishnah like this. Titnan. Okay, here's a Mishnah in meila. Shilach biyad pikach. We're going to have 4 people here. Okay, we'll start with Ruvain sends with Shimon. Okay, he sends with Shimon something that was sanctified. Ruvain works in the temple. He sends Shimon with money from the temple or an item from the temple to take to a store to sell. Now they forgot that it was hekdesh, but they remembered, both Reuven and Shimon remembered before Shimon gets to the store that it was sanctified. But he gives it to the chemvani anyway. So now, if you hold mazid, it's mitchalel, then it should already go to chulin. And then the chemvani, when he goes and uses it and passes it on, so Shimon goes to the store, gives it to Levi, and buys something from Levi, gives him this money. Let's say it's money from the temple treasury, and then Levi gives change back to Yehuda when he comes into his store. And that's the scenario. So if Reuven sends Shimon to do his errand, Shimon and Reuven both remember before the money gets to Levi. Levi, the storekeeper, gives the change to Yehuda. What happens? As soon as he gives the money to Yehuda, he's liable for meila. And what makes it clear here? That if you do it b'mezid, it wasn't mitchalel adayin. You didn't turn it to chulin, because the chemvani was the one who did it. Levi was the one who messed up the whole thing. Okay, that's how we prove halakha like Rabbi Yehuda in hekdesh and halakha like Rabbi Meir in maaser. Now they're going to go back to the maaser issue, and they say the following. Rabbi Yehuda b'maaser milo tnan. Wait, is it so clear we hold like Rabbi Meir when it comes to maaser, and we don't have a Mishnah that holds that the whole theory was stam Mishnah like Rabbi Meir? So we're going to hold like Rabbi Meir because we found the Mishnah that follows his opinion. But now we're going to say we also have a Mishnah that follows Rabbi Yehuda, okay? And then we're going to have stam Mishnah this and stam Mishnah that. Why is one going to win out over the other? The Hatnan, doesn't it say in a Mishnah? Hapodeh, now we're in a Mishnah in maaser sheni. Hapodeh maaser sheni shalom, musif alav chamishato, ben mishalo, ben mishanitan lo b'matana. If you redeem your maaser sheni, you have to add a chomesh, whether it was your own or whether it was given to you as a gift. Okay, if I redeem someone else's maaser sheni, I don't have to take an extra. I don't have to add the extra 5th. But if it was given to me as a gift and now owned by me, then I have to. Now, what does this show? Mani ilema Rabbi Meir. Ilema Rabbi Meir. If this is Rabbi Meir who said that maaser sheni belongs to God, well, mi matzayav le b'matana. How could I possibly have? How could there be a reality, a situation where I have money, where I have maaser sheni produce that was given to me as a gift? You can't give it to me as a gift if it belongs to God. He says it belongs to God. Elalav Rabbi Yehuda. So it must be Rabbi Yehuda. To which they answered, no, not necessarily. Well, you could have given me it as a gift in 2 ways. You gave it to me either once it was maaser sheni money. Okay, that won't work according to Rabbi Meir because it's mamon gavoa. But if you gave it to me before you took the maaser from it, you gave me all the fruits from your tree, or a pile of fruits from your tree that you didn't take maaser from. That's called tevel. Okay? So now, you gave it to me when it was tevel. That's not a problem. Well, it depends what you hold. But kasaval matanot shelo hormu k'mishelo hormu damin. He must hold that if you give me a pile of tevel, which means untithed produce, we don't view it as the whole is the sum of its future parts, which means in the future, it'll be truma, and maaser and regular, right? It'll be a mix of all those things. And then it's as if you're giving me, and then we look at it as if it's sanctified, and then you're giving me sanctified items, which you can't give me a gift if you don't own it. But we don't view it that way. We view the whole as what it is right now, not as the sum of its future parts, what it will be in the future. So that's what we're going to say now. He must hold, there's this Mishnah must hold, matanot shelo hurmu, if you haven't yet taken the maaser, the gifts yet, kimisha lo hurmu damyan. It's as if it's not called truma, it's not called maaser, it's not called anything. And then you could actually read the source according to Rabbi Meir and say, basically, even if it's mamon gavoa, someone could have given you the gift before it actually had the name of maaser on it. Tashma, second source, which is very similar, but a little different because you can't answer in the same way. And you'll see why in a minute. Same thing we're going to do for neta revai. Neta revai, again, we talked about this before, things that grow on the fourth year from the trees. And this has no tevel form. It's immediately from when it grows, it is already sanctified. It's got that level to it. So now if you're going to say it's the same, and Rabbi Meir says that's maaser sheni is mamon gavoa, the neta revai is also mamon gavoa. And what does it say here? We're going to have the same problem, which it says it's given as a gift. Given as a gift would have to be once it's already sanctified, and then it can't be Rabbi Meir. So hapodet neta revai shelo mosif alav chamishato ben mishalo ben shenitan lo b'matana. So again, if you have neta revai and you want to redeem it, you have to add a fifth, whether it's yours or whether you got it as a gift. Ilema mani, who is this according to? Ilema Rabbi Meir mi matzayavle. If it's Rabbi Meir, which is what we were hoping, right? Because we just said we're going to pass them like Rabbi Meir because Stam Mishnah like Rabbi Meir, but now we're going to have a Stam Mishnah which doesn't match Rabbi Meir. So mimata yava, you can't give them as a gift. Hagamri kodesh kodesh mimaser. We have this ksera shava mas kodesh kodesh. It's just like maaser, which means if maaser belongs to God, then neta revai belongs to God. Elalav Rabbi Yehuda. It must be Rabbi Yehuda. And again, you can't say it's before because there is no before. Well, maybe there is, and that's what we're going to say right now. It must be you gave it to him before it budded or when it was just a bud. And when it's just a bud, to lo ki Rabbi Yossi, and here you have to say, and it holds like a different opinion also, a particular opinion. Tamar smadar asur mipnei shehu pri. And it's not like Rabbi Yossi who holds that the smadar is already forbidden because the bud is the beginning of the fruit. But this must hold, no, the bud is not the beginning of a fruit. And if you got it as a gift when it was still a bud, well, then it's not even called neta revai yet, and it could still be your own, and then you could give it as a gift to someone. And that's why you could theoretically, or someone could theoretically have a gift that you gave them that was from this bud. Okay, and even if you hold like Rabbi Meir. So this Mishnah doesn't go against Rabbi Meir. Now we're going to have another one though. Tashma, mashach himenu maaser b'sela. Now, let's go back to our laws of kinyanim. If something is hekdesh, the kinyan is done by giving the money. If something is not hekdesh, then the kinyan is done by meshicha, pulling. So in this case, we have someone who takes maaser b'sela. I bought your maaser, okay, or let's take a name. Yael bought maaser from Tamal. When Yael buys the maaser from Tamal, it's worth a sela. But she doesn't pay her the money yet, she just pulls it. Now, again, this will be a kinyan if, right? Now, what's going to happen when the price fluctuates? The question is, did we get locked in at the price of Mashiach? Because Mashiach was Koneh, because it's Mamon Hedyot, regular person money. Or if it's Mamon Gava, then the Mashiach didn't do anything, and we're going to have to go by the price of when I actually go to pay. So let's see what happened. Lo speak lifdoto ad shama b'shtayim. By the time Yael actually went to pay Tamar the money, well, the price had gone up to 2, doubled in price. No tain sela. Yael only has to give Tamar the sela. I hope I'm not getting the words names confused. Who's buying from who? I'm sorry. But Yael is buying it from Tamar, redeeming it, or buying her fruits, her produce. So she says, right, I'm buying her maaser. Yael is buying Tamar's maaser. She says, here's a sela and mistaker b'sela. And she wins out because now she has produce that's worth double the value. And that's because Mashiach is Koneh. When is Mashiach Koneh? When is Mamon Hedyot? So this seems to go like Rabbi Yehuda against Rabbi Meir, right? Maaser sheni shelo. And then basically the maaser sheni becomes hers. So Mani, who is this according to? We already know. Rabbi Meir, Ilema Rabbi Meir, if you're going to say that, Amay mistaker b'sela, v'natan tekesef akamlo amarachmana, right? If it's Mamon Gavoa, we say, how do you redeem it? When you give the money. Remember, this pasuk that's not really a pasuk, but they always quote it. It says kesef in the pasuk, and it says v'kamlo. Money is what establishes the kinyan, and that didn't happen until the end. She should have paid the higher price. Elalav Rabbi Yehuda. It must have been Rabbi Yehuda. But then they say, if so, it's Rabbi Yehuda. Lo olam Rabbi Yehuda. This really can only work according to Rabbi Yehuda. V'hacha chad stama, v'hacha tre stami. Well, even if it's Rabbi Yehuda, we still can explain why we hold like Rabbi Meir. Because we have one stam mishnah like Rabbi Meir and one stam mishnah like Rabbi Yehuda, but they say this mishnah that goes like Rabbi Meir is one mishnah. The one like Rabbi Yehuda that we just read. But the one we saw before like Rabbi Meir, and we saw earlier in the beginning, earlier on this side of the daf, was actually found not only where we found it, but it also appears in Eduyot. Okay, it appears in two places. So that's why 2 against 1, and that's why we hold like Rabbi Meir. To which the Gemara says, wait a minute. Istama dafka, if the whole theory here is when you have a stam mishnah, it goes like, right, we're going to pass in that way. Mali chad stama, mali tre stami. What's the difference? If once you say there's this theory, a stam mishnah means we hold that way, but in this case, we have 2 different stam mishnahs. Now, one might happen to be written twice, but it ruins the whole thing here about there being a stam mishnah, because we have 2 different mishnayot that say 2 different things. So what's the difference if there's 3 and 2 say this and 1 says that? It's not a numbers game. It's that stam mishnah teaches us something. In this case, clearly stam mishnah doesn't teach us anything because there's 2 different stam mishnahs that contradict each other. To which they answer, right? So istama dafka mali chad stama mali tre stama. If you're going to say stama is the whole thing is all about stam teaches you halakha, what's the difference if it's 1 or 2? To which Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. This mishnah appear both in maaser sheni and in Eduyot. But Eduyot, it's not a matter of 2 against 1 versus the other mishnah that seemed to go, right? The other mishnah in, actually that mishnah, one second. I assume it's also in maaser sheni. Let me just check. Not that it matters, but yeah, also maaser sheni. So we have 2 mishnayot in maaser sheni that each say different things. But the one like Rabbi Meir appears in Eduyot. And Eduyot is considered t'nam bechirta. It's considered the special masechet because it's all these testimonies of rabbis about halachot, and therefore we paskin like that one. So it's a matter of quality versus quantity. That's the end of our daf. So what we did today, quick review, we started with a second understanding of how to understand Rabbi Meir in the Mishnah, and one that really seems to go more with the way we always understood meila, that really b'shgaga, it is mitchalel, it does become chulin, and you'd have to understand the Mishnah in a very unique case about something like the walls or the sanctified her with something that had some sort of use outside of sanctified area, like the kohanim's building, the regular kohanim's clothes, and that was a unique case, but really the rule would be otherwise. Then we brought a better, a more in-depth explanation of Rabbi Yochanan's approach in the name of Barpada about how to understand Rabbi Meir according to the original way, which is that hekdesh and meila in hekdesh is really only in food, things that got consumed, or it doesn't have to be food. It could be something that was burned. It could be something. Only if you consume the item would you actually be liable for meila. If it's something that can go back, like a mekach ta'ud, and just say, oh, had I realized I never would have done this, then it just reverts back and it actually doesn't lose its sanctity, in which case you're not liable for meila, in which case the main point, you can't betroth the woman with that. Then we paskined. How do we hold like Rabbi Meir on the mamon? We paskined like Rabbi Meir that maaser sheni is mamon gavah, belongs to God. We paskined like Rabbi Yehuda about the hekdesh, the really meila does turn every hekdesh into chulin, and if it's accidental, not if it's intentional, but if it's accidental. And then we said, why? Because stam mishnah like each one, which is the stam mishnah? And then we tried to say, seems like this other stam mishnah is the contradict. In the end, we did find one that contradicted in the maaser, and we said, oh, but that shouldn't bother us because ours appears in Eduyot, and that's a stronger one. And therefore, we must paskin that way. With that, we'll finish our daf, wishing everybody a moadim simcha v'chag sameach.